Alrighty guys, welcome back to the OMG MotoGP podcast, the German Grand Prix post-race review episode. And alongside myself, Renita Vermeulen, I am joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Keith Huewen. But we also have a very special guest for you guys. Now, you hear his voice on Eurosport and TNT, and you read his words in Motorcycle News. Welcome to the pod, Mr. Greg Haines. Greg, welcome to OMG.
Thank you very much, Renita. It's nice to have a nice positive intro like that. So thanks very much. Yeah, I'm excited.
We can soon bring the tone down if you like. That's not a problem.
No, keep it up. Let's keep the energy going. I like it.
Do you know what? I wonder, we've started this pod with everyone grinning and smiling, and people don't know the 15 minutes that we just had talking amongst ourselves, which has been quite an amusing 15 minutes. Perhaps we should have recorded that.
Yeah, quite an assortment of topics, wasn't it, Keith?
But nothing related to MotoGP, so let's get on with MotoGP. Now, Greg, you were actually on the ground with TNT this weekend in Sachsenring. How was it there? Because obviously this was such a drama-filled race weekend. Can you just tell us what it was like this weekend?
Well, the first thing is I realised how unfit I am again. Not that I'm doing much to rectify that, but there's some steps on the way up from the TV compound, as Keith knows very well. I did count them. I think it was 53 steps, very steep metal steps, because the Sachsenring's on so many different levels, and then the paddock's on 2 different levels. Through a tunnel under the track itself. So to get from the TV compound to the hospitality units, for example, is a good 15-minute walk, 12, 15 minutes. But no, apart from that, lots of drama on the track, wasn't there? And I had a funny feeling Jorge Martin was going to bin it in the sprint, which he didn't, but then he did in the Grand Prix. It just didn't seem that settled when I spoke with him on Friday. But it's good to be back there. I hadn't been back there for 10 years. So yeah, I like quirky places like that.
It's a quirky place, and I wonder why it's still on the calendar, to be honest. You've only got to look at turn 4. It's too close to the barriers. You've got that split hospitality thing. Notice that you went big on the hospitality before you started talking about the track. We know where your heart lies, and mine.
I know, it's bad, isn't it?
But the point being is that it is a difficult place logistically to get around. It is in the old East Germany. Julian Ryder used to give me a history lesson every time I was there about what came rumbling over the fields and what decade this happened and decade that happened. Of course, you got the old MZ factory down the road and so on and so forth. So it's got a lot of history, but the track itself is difficult to manage. It is like a kart track. It's a short track. I timed it. I'm a sad bloke. There's no doubt about it. I timed how long you're on the left-hand side of the tyre for both, MotoGP and Moto2. 30 seconds you are turning left for. Bearing in mind it's only a 90-second lap. So you've got a 90-second lap with 30 seconds of it left-hander before you then drop down the Ralph Waldman turn 11, Ralph Waldman corner, as it's now been renamed a couple of years ago. It is a very difficult racetrack, and of course that caught out Marc Marquez. Marc Marquez had another one of those weekends where his build-up to racing was appalling. Big crashes, he's blocked off at one point by Bradl meandering around in the middle of the track for some unknown reason. I don't know what the hell was going through Helmut Bradl's mind when he was on the racing. I can only think that he's more of a commentator now than he is a racer, and that's why he'd forgotten where he ought to be on the racetrack. But it's a situation where, again, qualifying down where Marc Marquez did was always going to be an uphill struggle, even though he's the king of the Sachsenring. Was always going to be an uphill struggle from that far back, bearing in mind how competitive he is now. But it did give us some 252,000 people in that little place over the weekend. I'm glad to hear it's still that popular, but you have to be there to experience it.
And it felt like it as well when we had to get out on the Saturday. The rain came down. It was supposed to come at sort of 5 o'clock, came about 4. So we thought we'll get back because we were done. And it was chaos. It took a long time to get out. We managed to find a shortcut. Well, a long cut that took less time because of the traffic. But I like, though, in a way. I know exactly what you mean, Keith, but it is also good. We've got these quirky venues. But yes, it is narrow. There's not much runoff. That's the concern. And also, if Stefan Bradl hadn't delayed Marc Marquez, it makes you wonder whether Marc could have actually won that race and maintained his record. Probably would have done, but we'll never know now.
Yeah, it was a wonderful weekend from the Gresini point of view, wasn't it? We'd got Lewis Hamilton that was that some clickbait artists had got out there as possibly being a buyer of Gresini, which made for a great talking point, but I don't think there's a lot in it. And then Gresini's price has gone up now since we got both of them on the podium on Sunday, which was rather remarkable and rather good fun. It would have been better if Alex had finished in front of Marc, but of course Marc was never going to allow that.
I know, it was quite an easy pass, wasn't it, to come through. I don't know about the Hamilton thing either. We know he's a big biker, don't we? He's done a bit of riding with Crescent Yamaha before. I know Bernie Ecclestone was considering a MotoGP team a year or two ago, and then it all went away, so I'm not sure. I can't see Bernie would bother with that now. Hamilton, I wouldn't be surprised if he got involved in some advisory role, but to actually buy a team, we'll have to just see, won't we? I'm not sure.
My thoughts on that subject, if I might just add a last one there, was that Hamilton wouldn't even need to spend a Hamilton penny, because true. I reckon Liberty would fund the whole thing, because it would be about having Hamilton's name associated with MotoGP would be a good thing as far as Liberty were concerned for the whole sport. So they would fund that, I would suggest, and it would be a great investment for Lewis, because he wouldn't have to spend any cash.
Yeah, it would be a good bit of cross-promotion, wouldn't it? They're like terms such as cross-promotion, don't know, these big companies. So, yeah, from that point of view, it would make good sense, wouldn't it? I mean, there was even a wild rumour of them racing on the same weekends, wasn't there? I don't know what you made of that one, Keith. But there's so many. Imagine having to prepare a racetrack for both. I mean, all the safety measures. It's not logistically going to happen, is it?
No, I just can't see how it would happen, because the gaps between races where you'd have to clean up tyre deg and the like that would be all over the track on a different line. I mean, the rubber would be in different places. It would be so difficult to make that work from a professional point of view. Yeah, if you're at a club race and you fancy running cars and bikes, of course you could probably do that, but not at this level for Formula One or for MotoGP, but particularly for MotoGP. You've only got to look at the rubbish that the cars leave on the track after they finish the session. You know, it's all over our line, because they tend to, they're obviously in completely different places on the track than what a MotoGP bike would be. So I never really saw that as a viable thing. Not on the same day. Maybe they could do something on the same weekend, but it would still take, logistically, it would be a big deal.
Well, guys, I wanted to speak about Marquez a little bit more, because obviously you're talking about him, and that high side that he had on the weekend is something that we haven't seen necessarily from Marc or from anyone in a really long time. And looking at some of the comments online, people going, oh, he's riding his bike like a Honda style again. If he didn't save it, it wouldn't have high-sided. What's your takes on that, Greg? You were obviously there, you saw it. Was it just the rear kicked in and he flipped over the front, or was he really trying to save it that caused it? What's your take on that?
Chatting with the guys at TNT, Neil Hodgson and co, they all reckon he tried to save it, didn't he? And then the double whammy was he ended up going even further through the air and came crashing down from a massive height at the top of the Vermeulen curve, as Keith described before. I still think that he is the best Grand Prix rider who has ever lived. That's a contentious point in some people's opinion. Look what he keeps doing, bouncing back from these incidents on a bike that is a year older than the other Ducatis. I think the guy is brilliant for our sport, and surely he'll be winning a Grand Prix soon, won't he? Because he thoroughly deserves to. It's a bit of a shame his record. You know, for people like us, Keith, we like our records and stats, and his 100% success rate of every Grand Prix started there has gone out the window now in terms of winning it. But I thought, it's great drama, Renita, for the TV, isn't it? To see someone crashing like that and bouncing back, passing his brother, joining him on the podium. I thought it was great, but I do think he probably would have won had that not happened. And definitely the incident with Stefan Bradl, he would have been closer to the front. And we know how important qualifying is these days. But it was a scary crash, wasn't it? It's one of those ones that gets worse every time you watch it back in slow motion from 5 different angles. Scary.
Well, one of the positive things is Acosta's not going to overtake him for being the youngest ever MotoGP winner. That is for sure. Because he had just this weekend to sort that one out. So Acosta's didn't quite... he got a dose of reality at Sachsenring. I think the thing is as well that there's no testing at Sachsenring, so they've not really got the... sometimes an older bike has settings from data from previously, and they've not got quite the big catch-up. They've already got the kind of data and information they need for an older bike when you go to a track that you've not tested or done much running on. The crash itself, I mean, Hodgie and co will know, obviously, from racing themselves. I mean, when you half-save a bike, then you're in bigger problems. My biggest injuries have come from when I've half-saved a bike. You can go to Jorge Martin when another unforced error from Jorge Martin, if I jump forward a little bit. The reason there was no chance of him saving it is because he was in the no man's land of the transition from being upright into the corner on your knee. You can't save something if your knee's not already sort of scraping along the floor, so you can pick the thing up on the front and stay on the rubber. And again, with Marquez, The problem, of course, is you've got that massive compromise at the Sachsenring. You get it at some other tracks as well, but nowhere near as emphasised as you get there, in that you are on the left-hand side of the corner for 30 seconds before you turn right. Tyres, you only need a couple of degrees different from what you were expecting. And the weather there, again, like we've seen before, wasn't consistent. It was warmer one day, and then it was cooler, and then it was warmer again, then the wind whipped up for a moment or two. Those things all make a massive difference as to how the motorcycle's going to perform. And Marc got caught out. But I defy even Marc to save that kind of crash at that kind of corner. When it lets go there, people might say, well, he didn't save it. I mean, half the time it's a reactionary thing that's got nothing to do with your brain. It is an absolute reflex situation. It just happens that Marc's tendency in the past has always been to have reflexes faster than just about anybody else, including cats.
I just imagine the punishment he's put his body through over the years, what he's going to be like when he gets to 80. It's can't even imagine how one man can go through so much physical strain, and not to mention the mental challenges, I guess.
Well, it's the motivation, isn't it? To do what he does and to keep doing what he does at the level he keeps doing it at. I mean, it has knocked the edge off of him at the moment. It's going to be what's interesting for me for next year is going to be whether he comes back that final degree that we know he has been capable of, but we're not really quite seeing it just yet. Whether the GP25 or whatever it is we've got for next year is going to give him the opportunity for that last little bit. Marc pushes his luck. There is no doubt about it. He has pushed his luck for his entire career of racing motorcycles. And he has the talent to get away with stuff that no normal mortal being can usually achieve. But he's now in his 30s. He's been beaten up, arms twisted, God knows what, facing in the wrong direction. And it will be interesting to see whether he can make that work. I think he probably can. He's a remarkable human being. I've never seen the like before.
Before we move on, I have a question. How much did that crash really hinder him? I guess, like, watching Sachsenring on TV for me, right? You can see that there's some changes in levels and everything, but from what the commentators were saying, there's a lot. With him having that damage to his ribs, can't take a full breath in, that pain in his pinky, was it really that hard to ride that track?
Yes. I mean, I can tell you that from experience.
Yes.
I've had all my ribs pinged off my sternum before. They're not been broken before, but they and even now, if I do it quick, I'm even feeling doink doink. Ribs, you can't even hold your arm out without it hurting. Let alone ride a motorcycle around somewhere like the Sachsenring. I mean, that is his pinky finger. Get over that. You get it occasionally. But the ribs, believe me, ribs are like lower back. If you've got an injury to your spine, the lower spine, every single thing you do, apart from talking, obviously, is difficult. But I have massive sympathy for him, and I think anybody else that was out there that's had those kind of crushing rib injuries will know exactly what I'm on about.
How did he do it then, Keith? How do they do it? Because if that happened to us, we'd be lying down or whatever, not doing anything for weeks, wouldn't we? I probably can't really call myself normal, but any normal person, how the hell do they get around these things? Yeah, stop laughing, Renita.
I don't think you get around them. I think that Marc Marquez that is part of his remarkable makeup. I mean, some of the injuries he's had. Yeah, you've only got to look at I did a 60th birthday the other day, believe it or not. Chris Herring, who you may remember, Kipper Herring from before, ran various PR companies and so on. I went to his 60th birthday, and Ron and Leon Haslam turned up. And Leon, fresh off the back of 2 big offs at Knock Hill in BSB, British Superbikes, he is black from the middle of his back through his buttocks, which he was quite happy to show his backside off to my wife, which was quite funny. He's completely black. He's as black as this with a bit of blue involved in it. And he's riding all the time. I think these guys managed to put this stuff to one side. And Marc Marquez is a degree and a level above that. I mean, anybody that's had their arm sawn in half to turn it around and get the right degree on it and then had it all put back. Even the small injuries, just bruising, is incredibly difficult to cope with when you're a normal person. But somehow, arm pump, collarbone fixes. How many people do you know that got the old collarbone scars here? And, you can go back to Lorenzo, if you like, the busted himself up at Assen in the first practice sessions and was back by the race day, finishing, I think he finished fourth, I can't remember now, with a collarbone that had only just been bolted together and stitched back up. Well, that involves someone cutting open your skin, pulling it back, putting their hands in there and rootling around and screwing things into your bones, and then stitching it back again. And then 3 days later, you're back racing a motorbike that's trying to kill you at every other acceleration point. I mean, if you put it in those gruesome perspective, that is what it's like. And these guys ride them like it. I've seen it many, many times, and I'm in awe of it. I mean, I have to say that I consider myself a wimp in comparison to the way some of these guys manage to come back at it.
Yeah.
Even Steve Parrish is braver than me. I remember Steve Parrish, another old git like me, breaking his collarbone, and then the next thing, I think he's had both of his done as well. And the next thing, he's racing next weekend as well. I know in his case he's motivated by money, but apart from that,
but we take it for granted, don't we? We'll say in the commentary, oh, he's had it plated, he's had X number of screws put in or whatever, drilled through and we just get on with it, don't we? Like it's normal. But they're doing it all the time. It's mad. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose you shouldn't be doing 120 mile an hour when you're driving down the road nowadays anyway. But for those of you that still break the law massively, just try sticking your hand out the window at that kind of speed. And you'll get some kind of impression of just how bloody fast it is, let alone throwing yourself up the street at it.
I was just going to say, I thought you were going to say jump out the window at 120 then on the motorway.
Yeah, I don't think we should be encouraging that, even on OMG MotoGP. Yeah. Thank you very much, Glenn. Greg. I called you Glenn.
I've been called
I only known you since you were a child.
Right. Well, you guys were talking about stats before, so let's chat some stats from this weekend. So Fabio Quartararo raced his 100th Grand Prix start this weekend, and our race winner, Pecco Bagnaia, was his 200th Grand Prix start this weekend. And what a way to end it with the victory. And now he's 10 points into the championship lead. But that crash from Jorge Martin, I didn't see it coming. And listening to his post-race interview, he didn't see it coming either, right? What was going on there?
Yeah, an unforced error. I mean, that turn one is a tricky old turn one anyway at Sachsenring, because it's all out of shape on the way in. There's a kicker on the brakes on the way in, and quite often, just as you tip in there, you can just feel the front slipping away from you. But right where he did it, 1/3 into the corner, there's no saving that. It's as much of a face plant as in wet conditions. So an unforced error from him. It's quite funny when you see people say, "I'll learn from that and it won't happen again." That's just bullshit, because it was one of them ones it's the tiniest mistake that he's made, and he's had him out of there and it's cost him dearly. But it comes at the same time on the other side. You mentioned Pecco. I mean, Pecco at the minute, in the last 7 races, he's had 6 wins and a let me check it, and a 3rd place in a sprint race. So he's since Catalonia, that man has been untouchable pretty much. And that's what it takes. We've seen him do it before. We keep mentioning the famous 90-odd point deficit that he managed to pull back and win the title with. And he's on it again. And I mean, I think that's more than the crash that Jorge Martin had. I think it's going to be the relentless mental stress he's going to be under from Pecco's performances. The guy at the moment is just a machine. Can't wait till next year when he's got Marc alongside him.
Yeah. Do you reckon that's going to... Do you think it could implode, you two? Because there's going to be an argument or two, isn't there? Do you think they'll just get on with it?
No, do you know what? I really don't think it. I think Marc might play that game, but I think Pecco's above that. I love the way Bagnaia deals with his life. He looks laid back. He looks smiley. He deals with adversity quite well. And he is right now. This is going to sound, you can shout me down for this one. I always think of Dovizioso. He's like a faster Andrea Dovizioso. I always like the way Dovizioso went about his business with no big bloody fanfare over stuff, but he just kind of got on with it. Well, Pecco's a level above perhaps even Andrea Dovizioso, who was a great rider, obviously, in his time on a Ducati. But I just think that he goes about it in that manner. And I don't think Marc's going to get under his skin quite as much as Marc is able to in most cases next year.
Pecco's such a gentleman as
Mind
well.
you.
He's so
I agree.
gentle.
I think we'll see.
Isn't he? I did an interview with him. Sorry, Renita. He's such a gentleman. He comes in, he'll shake your hand, he'll take a time to talk to you before the interview starts. I did notice with Martin, and it struck me actually, he just wants to get on with it. And as soon as you thanked him at the end of the interview, he's out of there. Before you've even barely finished wrapping up the interview, he's out of camera shot.
Maybe he don't like you.
Well, probably not, Keith. Probably not. There's a lot of different people. We've still got time left of this podcast. I'll get you back for that. But no, yeah, I don't know. It just seems a completely different personality.
I think
Yeah,
you're
that's what I was
right.
going to say. I think that Mark's going to do the whole head game thing, and I don't even think it's going to phase Pecco. He's just going to be cool as a cucumber, the professor, right?
Yeah.
Is how he does everything. The professor. Well, talked about the winner, talked about Jorge, talked about Mark. The next headline that I feel like we have to bring up, Trackhouse this weekend.
Oh.
What a phenomenal weekend for them, right? Qualifying second and third on the grid, and Miguel Oliveira finishing second in the sprint. Yeah, second P2 in the sprint. Phenomenal. And that's just what Trackhouse needed, right? What a way to kick off the rest of their season.
You feel like the stars are aligning with Trackhouse. I mean, we've been banging the drum about Trackhouse. Their overall statistics, if you like, at the end of the year are not looking as good as they really, 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 really should be, or what they deserve, because their performances have been great. You know, we made bets earlier on about bold predictions here on OMG, didn't we? And I'd got Fernandez in as a bold prediction on the podium, and you know, at the time I was taking a bit of a flyer and maybe a bit of a grin and you know, tongue in cheek kind of thing. Blimey, I can see Fernandez finishing on the podium this year somewhere. And that's not discounting Oliveira, of course. He's the bigger name of the two at the moment. But you want them to do well, because we want that bloody American marketplace back in place. You know, it's so important from an American situation. Sorry to bang on about the Americas, but really it's one of the biggest markets in the world, and MotoGP, and not particularly well represented there. But all of a sudden, we've got Joe Roberts, who's doing a bit of the business, you know, in Moto2. We've got Trackhouse, who are looking really good with the American flag emblazoned all over everything. And if we can get that to work, Liberty obviously are an American group, if you like. Their headquarters and the like are there. So that's going to be a big thing. How is that Liberty thing going on, Greg, from a point of view? I mean, the monopolies people are obviously looking at the situation to make sure that buyout can go through. Is there any rumours or any conversation going around the paddock? Is it? I mean, I'm assuming it's definitely going to happen.
I think it will happen, Keith. I've been talking to people around the paddock about this in the media centre, and the truth is no one knows for sure. What is definitely a thing is the whole calendar issue and the fact that Dorna seems under pressure. I think, from what I gather, they've got to have 20 Grand Prix, because if they don't, there's this rumour of Kazakhstan dropping off. We know it won't happen. I don't know whether it's actually gone out yet, but I think something might even go out today as we record this. I think the teams and broadcasters have been notified anyway. So that's one thing going on. So I think Liberty will not want problems with calendars in the future, because it makes it all look a bit silly, doesn't it? But yeah, they're waiting for it to go through the Monopolies Commission or whatever it's called. We're seeing what they're going to do with World Superbikes as well. Would they really let World Superbikes go to someone else? Yeah, there's even rumours of Discovery. This has happened before. There was a rumour back in 19 of Discovery merging World Endurance and World Superbike and putting them together. Would have been very, very difficult to do that, though. Then the whole pandemic scuppered it anyway. So that's one thing. Will they keep World Superbikes? I think they will, at least for a few more years. And then MotoGP, I think it's going to happen, but it's all gone a bit quiet. I'm trying to find out from people at Dorna and journos around the media centre. No one knows for sure, but I'd be surprised if it didn't happen. Bernie Ecclestone was blocked, wasn't he, from doing this? I think he put a company together called Two Wheel Promotions, was it, back in about 92, just before Dorna came in?
Yeah, I mean, he promoted a couple of race meetings and stuff like that. But I mean, Bernie back in the day was, you know, it's funny, isn't it? But Bernie Ecclestone was yesterday's news at Formula One for some years towards the end of it. I mean, he became that kind of anachronism almost. That he was the old boy that was holding Formula One back in the end, when really Formula One has got a lot to thank the likes of Bernie Ecclestone for, because he produced that big money-making machine. But in the end, he was the guy holding it all back. And and they needed to get rid of him. You know, Dorna and Liberty making this merger is a big thing for MotoGP. I know there are a lot of people that are not 100% happy with the fact that Formula One and MotoGP might merge in their thinking to some extent. But from a professional sport, it's kind of got to go that way. I've just come back from a weekend at Mallory Park here in the UK. Little tiny track, run by Stuart Hickin, who owns Hawk Suzuki, which is a BSB team. And Stuart Hickin does a really, really good job. But it was a 50th anniversary of the TZ 750, and we had Stevie Baker came over from America to run his Yamaha Canada machine. And fantastic event. But what struck me was how far we have moved forward from those days. Yeah, great event, great. All the old boys were there. Old boys, old girls, old people, old motorcycles. Great event, really, really good fun. But this is now. We've moved forward. We are where we are. I think, today is we are getting fantastic races across Moto3, Moto2, MotoGP, Moto E, if you want to even, spread me to something that I don't particularly agree with, electric bikes. Oh my God, let's not go there. So it's kind of one of those things. I'm showing my age, aren't I, when it comes to that kind of stuff. And as long as we
I can't wait to read the comments.
As long as I know, one of them slammed me last week because I've been saying that I was behind the times when it came to the way Lewis Hamilton dresses. I mean, if any of you start dressing like Lewis Hamilton at a motorbike meeting, I'm done. But then, luckily, there was one saviour. One guy wrote back and said, "Hey, I'm half Keith's age, and I don't want to dress like that either."
I wouldn't want to dress like that either, for the record. And I'm only 1/3 your age, Keith.
Yes, you are.
No,
I mean, I love the way that you I love the way that you put even that into a statistical context.
I'm not.
Greg Haines, by the way,
I'm doing myself a big favour there.
Greg Haines is an animal when it comes to statistics. He keeps looking around because he's looking for his books. Look,
they're over there.
If you're watching this on YouTube, if you wonder why he's looking around, he's at his mum and dad's, and he doesn't feel safe at the moment that he hasn't got his books within arm's length.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I was just going to...
I've known Greg. The first time I met Greg was he came bounding across. He was like a puppy at a Grand Prix. Came working for Dorna. He came bounding across to see me in the paddock, and we've been mates ever since.
Do you remember where it was, Keith, as well? It was the Sepang test in 2014, it would have been, wouldn't it, when you were coming in with BT Sport at the time? Yeah, that's 10 years ago.
It was.
It's over 10 years ago. It's mad.
It's amazing how time flies, and it continues to. I can't believe we are where we are in this year already. We're on, to the British Grand Prix in 3 weeks' time. We've got another short break, summer break they call it at the moment, and then really, from that point onwards, you need to be your age, Greg, because the momentum for motorbike races after the British Grand Prix is just relentless. That is where we're going to see. We talked about it pre-season, where teams, hospitality teams particularly, all the infrastructure that has to move from track to track. And I know you've got some news on what's been going on with World Superbike guys trying to get across the channel here to the UK for the World Superbike round that's coming up soon here at Donington. But I mean, the whole thing, trying to move that massive group of people and infrastructure from country to country and now continent to continent, as things have obviously rolled on, is such a big deal.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mess actually at the moment as we talk on this podcast. The hospitality trucks are stuck in Calais in the north of France. Anything coming from Italy, apparently. So that's Aruba Ducati and Barney and Yamaha as well, several others. So that's not a great situation, isn't it? Let's hope they can get that sorted out to get away to what some in Dorna still consider a flyaway event at the moment, believe it or not, because it's outside of mainland Europe. So that's something else they need to get sorted, the World Superbike calendar for next year. I was also just going to mention something on Bernie Ecclestone as well, because apparently, talking to some of our colleagues I know from when I used to work in F1 before, briefly, for 4 years there, Bernie's still quite involved in the sense that Stefano Domenicali's on the phone with him most days, apparently, because when Liberty came in, everyone wanted a piece of the pie then, didn't they? Had Chase Carey and all sorts of different people there in authority. So I think sometimes they still got on the phone to Bernie to try and sort out certain little scenarios. So that's quite funny. Even though he's now 93 and you think he'd just want to sit back and relax, wouldn't you?
He's my hero. I mean, when you see what he's achieved from being a tyre kicker, which is basically, second-hand car dealer, as the BRDC used to sort of terminology, the disrespectful terminology people used about Bernie Ecclestone, because Silverstone were forced into having to do things if they wanted their Formula One Grand Prix. What a mess that was when you got a Brit running the show and you got a British track like the BRDC were in charge of, and that they were at loggerheads every single opportunity. And I think it cost Silverstone a huge amount of money that it didn't need to cost them, just because they alienated the likes of Ecclestone.
Yeah, he hated
if the
them,
rumours
didn't
are to be believed.
he? He hated the blazer-wearing squad, as he used to call them, didn't he, when it was Jackie Stewart and co running it at the time. It was not a great situation. I never understand, Keith, as well, the fact you've got pretty much the whole F1 grid based in that area, bar 2 or 3, Ferrari notably. And yet that Grand Prix is not government funded. We've gone off on a right tangent here now, but I've always found that confusing as well. But the industry we have in this country, in the automotive sector. But anyway, there we go. Never mind.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't know whether people pay attention to it or are even interested in it, but I mean, places like Sepang and most of the tracks that we visit are local authority or local government helped, funded, and some even by central government, because they take it as a prestige of having a Grand Prix in their country, and it makes a big difference, a big deal. But Silverstone, no, it has to stand on its own feet. Which is why, I mean, MSBR, I mean, if you look at any of the tracks that there are around, from Brands Hatch, Alton Park, and all these places that are kind of getting a bit long in the tooth, but need a fortune to keep them running, there's no real local authority help regarding any of that. Although, having said that, sometimes I think it's a bit disingenuous. Silverstone, funny how they did get a dual carriageway that kind of got ploughed right past their front door, and there are a few other bits and pieces that really, infrastructure-wise, indirectly, if you like, assisted with the traffic flow and the like at Silverstone. So I suppose that there are sometimes things that do go their way in an indirect kind of a way. But you're right, it's not like it's direct government putting up money.
Right, you two, let's go back to MotoGP. As much as we love F1, if we could get back to MotoGP, that would be great. Thank you. One more point I wanted to touch on with the race was that there was some of those tire pressure penalties come through again. And I heard Pecco talk in his post-race interview saying that he struggled with tire grip this weekend. Is that common with this type of track? Because I know you guys were saying it's shorter, it's tighter, less opportunity to overtake. Are we going to see issues on these sorts of track with tires? Keith, Greg, what's your take on this?
Well, I think that as things get more competitive during the course of the year, and tire pressure predictions settle down, if you like, and it is a prediction in many cases, because they set a tire pressure based on where they think you're going to be running and amongst bikes you're going to be running amongst. If you're running amongst a big bunch of riders, your tire temperature, all that heat that's being blasted out, is a tremendous amount of heat that's generated by these motorcycles while they run in a pack. And if you're in the middle of that, then your tire pressure is going up and up and up and up, and you've got the ballooning effect on the front tire. And before you know it, the bike just isn't performing grip-wise as you would want it to do. So you tend to start a race, obviously, with lower tire pressures. But if you're out in fresh air and you haven't predicted to be out in fresh air, then you have a problem. I don't know what happened to Jorge Martin, why he will have slipped off in the way he did. Whether that was tyre pressure related, whether that was higher than he was expecting it to be, so therefore he didn't quite have the tyre grip at the front end that he was expecting. But he'd been running in fresh air for a long time. So really the prediction that him and his crew chief should have had with that, I can't imagine that was a tyre pressure incident. They will know better than us, and they won't be telling us. But it's like, get your crystal ball out. Hang on a minute. We want the best possible performance from these tyres. So we're going to run 1.8 bar or whatever it might be. I think 1.8 is the lowest you can go for, is it 50 or 60% of the race? Might be 60% anyway. But it's still a tricky thing to predict. And as the series goes on and we get close, and again, probably what caught a lot of people out, Renita, sorry to meander about this, but with a brain like I've got, slowly but surely things make a connection. The problem probably was the disparity in track temperature over the couple of days. They didn't get a straightforward, straight data run at it. So that makes life difficult to get your prediction dead right for racing as well. So there's a lot of elements that are on the move, and the nuances, that give you that problem. I hope not, is the short answer, that we have that problem continuing through the year. But I can see it raising its ugly head before this season is over and done with. And I can see it costing major championship points of some of the front runners. And that will be an issue. They're not going to get a ban now, like they're not going to get disqualified from the race or the results anymore. It's a 16-second penalty. 16-second penalty means your race is over. You're in MotoGP particularly, you're going to be outside of the top 15 point scoring places in the main race. So it will be an issue that everyone's across and everyone's going to be paying attention to.
Greg, was there much talk of it from what you heard from the riders with regards to tyre wear and things like that on the weekend?
Well, one we were wondering is Fermin Aldeguer, because he was under investigation as well in Moto2, and had that been the 16-second penalty Keith just mentioned, that would have been a Jake Dixon victory. But I just never like seeing any sporting event change. I know we have a very technical sport, don't we? And you have to carefully monitor these things. But it's never nice to see the podium procedure take place and the crowd leaves the circuit, and the next thing you know is, he didn't actually win the race because he's been given a tyre pressure penalty or whatever it might be at the time. I know it's for safety. It's the same with the curbs and the green paint and all that. It is for safety, and the riders have pushed for a lot of this. Let's not forget. It just makes you wonder, though, sometimes. I mean, some people say put a penalty on them for the next Grand Prix, but some people don't like that because it's saying close one event and start the next one. Don't give them a grid penalty for something that's happened, a week or two before. I think the riders accept, though, now it's not this outcry we had last year that this isn't fair and all the rest of it. They know it is for their own safety, and they know they need to calculate it. But as you've just said, Keith, how do you possibly know if you're expecting to start from pole and disappear off into the distance, which has happened a few times this year, make a bad start, run off, and have to come back through again, or vice versa? We don't really want to see people dropping back, do we, for tyre pressures and letting people through that we saw at Aston. It's a bit like this tyre saving stuff that goes on in Formula One. It just doesn't feel MotoGP enough to me. Then again, can we really slag them off for something that is designed for people's safety?
Yeah, we know what doesn't feel MotoGP to me, just speaking on that subject, is when they're in these qualifying or these practice sessions and they're just going out on the track and they're wanting to get a tow, and then they're all just kind of sitting there, and it's like, what are you doing?
That was mad.
Why are you not just going out? And they do it in the lower classes, and you expect that because, they're young and they got to learn. But these are the guys in the premier class. Why are they doing this? I know it's not to get a tow, but why are they? I can't wrap my head around it.
We had it in practice.
Can you guys explain it to me?
Moto3, we had this on Saturday morning, and it's happened a lot in Supersport 300 and Moto3 though over the last few years. I don't think there's any excuse for that. We had the silly thing there though in Germany at the weekend was a load of people were then giving long lap penalties and double long lap penalties, which I'm not always convinced is the safest thing to do either. When you've got people ducking back in, especially on that long lap at the Sachsenring, right onto the heart of the line. There was nearly a massive collision, wasn't there? Was it Ortola and Furasato, I think it was, coming out of that last corner? What about, I got slated for this actually by someone who was involved at the FIA when the long lap started, but I've always had the worry. What if someone loses the front and crashes just as someone else is taking their long lap penalty? I don't know. It just feels... I think it's good that you've got a real-time penalty and it's not added on after the race. That's better. But in terms of riders coasting on the line and all the rest of it, I don't see how this can keep going on because they are told constantly.
You're on difficult ground with all of that, I've got to say. I mean, where do you go next? I mean, the fact is pit lane exits run around the outside of, Phillip Island, for instance. You've got a pit lane exit that comes right the way around the outside of Doohan's Corner. Somebody falls off at 200 mile an hour, and that's going to be a catastrophe.
Yeah.
We've had it before. I remember, was it Petrucci at Aragon, I think, that got wiped when he was rolling out of pit lane. I can't remember exactly, but anyway.
Yeah.
But the point being is that track design back in the day, pit exits are in the wrong place on some traditional tracks. Long lap penalty is something that's, long lap loops have been put in places that, it's the safest place that they can stick it, And I think the long lap penalty is miles better than a pit lane ride through because your race is over on a pit lane ride through. So these are some kind of debates that we've had back in the day. I mean, there is no alternative as far as that's concerned at the moment. At least it's an instantaneous penalty. We see it. They deal with it, and then we get the option that their race isn't over. So we get the excitement of them having to come back through. So, and we've seen people, that have started from pit lane that have won races, in the past. So there are various penalties, but as far as I'm concerned, you're right. In as much as retrospective penalties to interfere with our podiums or wherever it might be are just bloody annoying. And these tyre pressure things, to some extent, I mean, haven't we been waiting for some time for Michelin to produce the next upgrade of tyre that's supposed to be dealing with this tyre pressure problem? There must be some kind of technical tyre engineering situation where they're going to cope with it a little bit. And then again, lesser downforce that we're going to have come 2027 when the rules kick in. So all of these things are slowly but surely going to be dealing with this. But for this year, there will be tyre pressure penalties, but hopefully they'll only be few and far between.
Yeah, and I guess we shouldn't be too hard as well because of the fact these things have been brought in for safety, haven't they? And that's got to be number one at the end of the day. Surprise, surprise in World Superbike. Since Pirelli's introduced 3 random spot checks on the grid for tyre pressure in the last few years. Surprise, surprise, there's been far fewer problems with tyre pressures and wheels, the tyres moving on the rim and all that sort of thing we'd had sort of around 2017, 18, 19 sort of time. So yeah, we can't... I guess it seems a bit silly sometimes for us to be saying how dangerous things are in what is a rather dangerous sport to begin with in the first place. So, yeah, I think let's just try and get the riders behaving as properly as they can. And I guess the teams are going to have to just calculate. We haven't had too many tyre pressure infringements, have we? Luckily. Not half as many as everyone expected when it came in last year, anyway.
Thank God.
Right, well, let's move on to Moto 2. Moto 3 real quick. Moto 2 real quick, because we have to shout out Jake Dixon. What a ride by Jake, finishing P2. This is the comeback that we need after that horrible start that he had this year. Getting that confidence back. He's been on the podium now. Hopefully he can rest up, come to Silverstone, and continue on for the year. But so we had Aldiger, we had Dixon and Agura, and Joe Roberts. Speaking about collarbones earlier, I was thinking of him. He had his plated. So Moto2 was going off. I want to shout out Senna Agius because he had an incredible ride as well, all the way through up until that last little, I think it was tyre wear that he struggled with. But what was your take on the Moto2 race? For me, I thought it was brilliant.
I never thought Jake Dixon was that clever. Sorry, Jake, just taking the mickey because I know you listen. I mean, he rode a very intelligent race. I mean, tyres were going to be the issue with Moto2 as well. And he rode a really intelligent race and he deserved that second place. You know, the win surely will be coming again. He's on a bit of a roll again now. He's having his best time in the season. It's beginning to ramp up just before the British Grand Prix. He's going to have 3 weeks off to you know, all these guys have got bruises and bumps and tears and pulls and things that they can spend a little bit of time working on now before the British Grand Prix. So Jake's going to be in the best possible mental and physical condition when we get to the British Grand Prix in 3 weeks' time. It was a clever race. He rode a great race and he definitely got what he deserved. Nice 20 points.
Yeah, you've got to give Jake credit, haven't you? Because let's be honest, so many people wrote him off. You know, it's not often these days somebody jumps up from British Superbikes to that paddock, is it, the GP paddock, and wins races and finishes on podiums. So they've had the suspension change this year, which they didn't really want by the sounds of it. And tyre. And the massive crash in Qatar as well when he was flying through the air and injured. So yeah, well done, Jake. And it's great, isn't it? What perfect timing just before the British Grand Prix. And he got his podium in Catalonia and he was fourth at Assen. So it looks like it's looking up now. I'm still trying to get used to the fact they've got a different colour. With Aspar having changed to this turquoise colour scheme and not red, you subconsciously get used to things, don't you, over the years? No, I thought it was great, though. He did a great job there. And also happy 40th to Sarah, whose birthday's coming up very soon, I heard, at the weekend. So that'll be a big occasion as well.
Well, because I was at Mallory.
No, that's my job. I meant to shout out that.
Oh, go on. Sorry.
Happy birthday, Sarah.
I actually sent a message to Sarah because I didn't know whether she was going to be at Mallory Park because before the lovely the lovely Sally has been working in the CAF at Mallory Park. So I rang Sally up to see if she was going to be at Mallory for the bike bonanza at the weekend. But she said, I'm on grandma duties. Well, they will have been celebrating quite nicely, wouldn't they, at the weekend?
Definitely. And moving on to Moto 3, we had Alonso take the win. Oh, I'm going to murder this name, Furasado.
No, you did good.
I get, honestly, with my accent, it's so hard. And then Ortola in third, but Colin Via crashing out. Oh, you just feel for him, don't you? He's trying so hard.
Alonso now has a massive lead. I mean, he has a 2-race lead in this championship. So we've still got a fair way to go yet. But you've got to say the Colombian is looking pretty damn good at the minute. 58 points. I'm just looking at the sheet in front of me here. It's going to take a bit of turning around. It's going to take some bad luck on his part and some good luck on other people's parts to turn this around at the minute. Moto3 certainly looks a bit lively. And now we can all sing the Colombian national anthem.
Yeah, one we've not had to hear too much.
Win-win.
Yeah. Do you know one thing that surprised me, though, on a slight negative? Since I've gone back into the paddock this year for these 3 Grand Prix with TNT, how little media coverage Moto2 and Moto3 seems to get in general now in comparison with when I was there before 10 years ago. I've been surprised. You go around the media centre, because, I'm trying to find things out, ask people questions. Not many people seem A, bothered, or B, in the know about what's going on in detail in Moto2 and Moto3, which surprises me because we've always had, haven't we? This is where bikes has differed to car racing in Grand Prix racing. We consider the 125s, the 250s, the 350s in the past, 50 and 80cc and all the rest of it as Grand Prix classes, whereas Formula 2 and Formula 3 in the car racing Grand Prix world are not considered as world titles. So I'm surprised that Moto 2 and 3 are getting as little media coverage, in my opinion, as they are at the moment. And I don't quite know why that is. I don't know that's because whether, we've got less terrestrial TV these days, and it's just not out there as much as it used to, perhaps. I'm not sure. But it shocks me quite a lot.
You imagine how you feel if you're in Moto E.
Yeah.
Zero coverage.
Exactly.
But I did question this last year a little bit, that whether the powers that be will be looking to promote MotoGP a bigger gap between the support classes, if you like, and consider them like they do in F1 as being support classes.
Yeah.
Will we see the same thing in, for instance, television commentary? Will that go that we'll have the main team that will do Formula MotoGP, and suddenly another team that will do Moto3, Moto2? I hope not, because you're right in what you say. Traditionally, our Grand Prix classes have been pretty much treated as equals through, if you win a 350 Grand Prix back in the day, it was a big deal. It garnered plenty of column inches or whatever it was back in the day that we used to shout about. Nowadays, it's about digital time. But back in the day, of course, it used to be column inches. Do you remember that, Renita? Column inches? Does that mean anything?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
That's okay.
That's exactly. Because back in the day, the press, we were all about paper media when it was sent out. And you would get a column, and how many inches of writing there was in that column was how you measured the amount of coverage that you'd got for that particular class. So column inches were very, very important back in the day. Nowadays, it's about clicks. It's now we're into digital media. It's how many times has someone looked at that piece of footage at any time. So it's the measurement of media coverage. And Greg's absolutely right. Moto3 and Moto2 are getting less coverage now than they ever have before. And as that algorithm picks up pace, and that all your digital guys can spot that the main place to be is in MotoGP with a headline called Marc Marquez, then that would be a situation where they will be focusing on all the time. Why do we have Marc Marquez in the headline quite often in any digital piece that goes out? Because immediately more people will click on that story. And back in the day, it was Barry Sheene. If you go back to the 70s when Barry Sheene was winning championships, if Barry Sheene was the headline, they would always have a picture of Barry Sheene on Motorcycle News on the front, because they know when you walked in the garage to go and get your fuel, there'd be a Motorcycle News stack on the stand. Don't even get a newsstand anymore in garages, but there used to be a Motorcycle News on there. And if you saw a picture of Barry Sheene, you bought Motorcycle News, even if you weren't a motorcycle enthusiast. So it makes the difference to the algorithm. Hey, OMG, MotoGP, sometimes we might be accused of it. With Marc Marquez, you'll see a Marc Marquez headline. We're talking about Marc Marquez because you can't not talk about Marc Marquez. But we will notice that clicks-wise, people tuning into our station will be across that. Somebody like Andrea Coleman, for instance, who we did an interview with recently. The headline was the most powerful woman in MotoGP, and she probably is when you come across her reach and what she does for our sport. But the interest level for that conversation, that very interesting conversation, I thought, even though I was doing the interview, you can always blank me out, was quite interesting. And yet it didn't get that much in the way of viewership. I think we had 3,000 or 4,000 people that on YouTube tuned into it and listened to it and appreciated it. So it's all about algorithms and who your favourite people are.
Yeah, and that's one thing we don't have in our country, but you still do in Spain, living in Spain. I went in my local petrol station the other day, and there is a cardboard cutout of Alex Rins outside the door, and it grabs your attention. They're on yogurt pots and driving instruction, the rack in Catalonia, the RAC, they've got these yellow cars for driving instruction. And they've still got the Marquez brothers, or they did not long ago, on the side of the door. They're still celebrities in Spain, and that's what we are lacking at the moment, isn't it, in our country over here? But the fact it's not all on terrestrial
Come on,
television.
Jake, get your finger out.
Yeah, exactly. No pressure, Mr. Dixon. And also, Renita, you asked us about Colin Via before. What an impressive guy he is. I know he's lost some ground with that crash on Sunday, but he really is an old head on young shoulders. He's got a great British accent when he speaks English, because he spent a lot of time actually working with Eddie O'Shea and chatting with these guys. But yeah, he said at Assen, we did an interview with him. He said, I said, were you not, inclined to dive up the inside of that last corner with all those fans there wanting you to win? He said, I'm already ahead of Ortona in the championship. Alonso was behind me. So even then he was still thinking 20 points is better than 0. He's really smart here. So I like that. I like the fact we've got a Dutch rider up and coming. He could go on to great things. And we need one, don't we? That's the only other thing I would say. As much as I love MotoGP, there's too many Italian and Spanish riders, and that's nothing against Italian and Spanish riders. We need variety, don't we? You'll know, Keith, with Jules, Foggy was the only guy winning from this country, winning World Superbike races between 95 and 2000. He was up against New Zealand, Kiwis, Americans, and all sorts, Italians. We need variety, don't we? We don't want too much of anything, in my opinion.
Well, we used to have more variety than Fogarty sometimes when we had wildcards that you could actually just bolt onto World Superbikes, which I find very disappointing. I think that's been a feature this year. I've looked at in Grand Prix, not so much World Superbike perhaps because I haven't been paying as much attention to that. Sorry,
but you will this weekend with Donington.
But the point being is you used to see wildcards. You'd see wildcards in Grand Prix, and they'd have opportunity to come out and do something special. And in World Superbike, those wildcards, particularly here on these shores, John Reynolds kicking their ass when they came to Brands Hatch or something, was a bit special. You get a wildcard rider from the British Championships that was quick enough to win a World Superbike round when they and I missed that. Is that an anachronism? Is that something that's just from the past and it will never come back to the future again? I find it, that's one part of the sport that I'm a little unhappy with. I would like to see the opportunity again for wildcard, but then you're talking about money, you're talking about machinery, the opportunity just isn't there. Holland needs it. Via's doing a great job. Britain obviously needs it. I have this conversation just about every week about the British Grand Prix and the fact that we've just come off the back of a massive Formula One Grand Prix down the road from me here. 15 minutes down the road is Silverstone for me. And we'll come, it's like a ghost town for the week before the MotoGP. It's been buzzing around here for 2 weeks leading up to the Formula One Grand Prix. But they had nearly 500,000 people there over the course of the weekend. Whereas we had 45,000 people there last year for MotoGP. There needs to be some radical rethinks regarding what happens on track and around that festival, if you like, to make that work. If Le Mans can get that many people there, and if you can get 250,000 people at bloody Sachsenring, we've got to do something differently here in Britain.
Yeah, it needs far more promotion, in my opinion, in the big airports. I came into Heathrow yesterday, back from Germany. Why are there not billboards all over Heathrow, our main airport, which is a massive hub for people connecting to fly to America and goodness knows where else? We need billboards up, we need signs, we need celebrities. You saw the F1 Grand Prix, didn't you? Gordon Ramsay and all sorts of different people have been there over the weekend, bringing in media interest. Yes, it's easy for me to say, but sometimes we drive to these events and you don't even see a billboard or a sign down the motorway, do you, until you're 5 minutes from the track? Why? Why have we not got the riders on BBC Breakfast on the Wednesday before the race, or with Susanna Reid on the sofa on ITV on Good Morning Britain and chatting away and getting more people interested? It wouldn't be that hard to organise that, would it? Or put a bike on a forecourt in your local petrol station. There's loads of stuff you could do.
Well, we've got some fairly big hubs around here. Northampton is nearby to Silverstone. Milton Keynes probably is the main one, which is not far out of London. It's only a 30-minute, 35-minute ride on a train out of London to Milton Keynes Central. And Milton Keynes is full of roundabouts. So why can't we have some of the roads shut off and do the old Marc Marquez round the streets thing that you see quite a lot of in the past? I mean, it's all possible.
Barcelona, sorry to
and the hotels around here benefit quite.
Sorry, Keith. Barcelona's just done a big display before the F1 Grand Prix the other day up and down Paseo de Gracia, which is like the Champs-Élysées of Barcelona. Exactly. We should be doing more of that. A lot more of that.
There you go. We've got a couple of here, haven't we? One for Greg, one for me.
I love it. This is great. Right, Greg, you just mentioned celebrities before, and Keanu Reeves was at MotoGP
Yes.
on this weekend. And it was so funny because I type in Google MotoGP news, and what comes up is normally like, MotoGP.com, Crash.net. Sorry, I don't want to say that name. Motorsport.com, other brands like that. But instead, it's coming up like e-news and these like celebrity channels saying Keanu Reeves steps out with girlfriend at MotoGP. Finally, this is what we need. We need more stuff like this to get it into the mainstream instead of it being like Lewis Hamilton goes to the Met Gala or whatever. It's Keanu Reeves, who everybody just loves, right? He's an absolute legend. Stepping out with his girlfriend, they don't make public appearances that often, and all of a sudden, MotoGP is now on a website that they'd never be on before. This is what we need also. Stuff like you guys were saying, because with the billboards and whatnot, we don't have that here in Australia as well for Phillip Island. It is honestly nothing, right? You might go to Melbourne and you might see them do a day there for the Oz Grand Prix Corp where it's like promo, but there's nothing. But to have a celebrity there, I just go, I need to get Chris Hemsworth to Phillip Island. I'm going to try and make that happen. Slide into the DMs.
And you're not
You'll
joking.
be- you'll be
But
in a
what
rush
was it
for
like?
Hemsworth.
What was it like having Keanu Reeves there? Because I heard him speak to Simon Grafer on the World broadcast, and Simon's there like going, oh my God, Keanu, you're awesome. Keanu's there to Simon, oh my God, Simon, you're amazing. And it was like this big love fest on there. But was it really cool to see someone with such a high stature
Yeah, and here's
there?
my 5 minutes FM. I interviewed him once at Laguna Seca World Superbikes, but it's just like, I don't really know much about films and cinema. I like going to the cinema, but I don't know that much about films. I'm not a film, but it's just like talking to a fan. He's got his own company, hasn't he? Arch Motorcycles as well, which he likes to promote. He is just a mad fan. Did you see the footage of him on the service road when he's watching the start and he's all excited? Then he runs across to see them coming down the waterfall on the other side. He's a real enthusiast, and which, in my opinion, I'm going to sound like you now, Keith, it's much better than one of these, influencers who turns up who doesn't know anything about the sport. I remember David Coulthard said once Christina Aguilera was pretending to, show an interest in Formula One, whether in Baku or somewhere. But yeah, I think it's much better when you've got a celebrity like Keanu who's actually into his racing and has bikes and rides and he's genuinely interested in meeting the riders. That's the way to put it across, isn't it? There's no point bringing... I know these influencers have millions and millions of followers and all the rest of it, but they're not interested and their followers won't be interested. Maybe I'm sounding like a dinosaur, I don't know. But to me, that seems random. It seems strange. They might post a couple of pictures, then they'll move on. They'll forget about it. Keanu won't.
There's room for a little bit of everything, I think, but you're right. Keanu Reeves is a good one. Lewis Hamilton would be a good one if he came trackside as well. I know that we're getting to the end of this, so I just personally wanted to big up a couple of names, if I could, from the MotoGP this weekend that we haven't touched on, that we really should do, since that we are OMG MotoGP. Morbidelli, looking good. Great ride from him coming back. I just wanted to say, just put it out there. It was a great ride from Franco, and I hope that continues. He was backing up Jorge Martin massively on the other Pramac bike. So Morbidelli, is he back? I really genuinely hope so. And of course, Alex Marquez getting that podium this weekend. I know that we touched on it with Marc Marquez, but that was a big deal, seeing him on a podium for the first time this year. Two riders there. I think this break is going to be good for everybody. British Grand Prix is going to be absolutely fantastic. I mean, if anybody... You should go to the British Grand Prix. There's this kind of unconscious bias against Silverstone. I can understand why, but please don't get sucked into... If you've never been to Silverstone, please don't get sucked into the unconscious bias that it's the bad place to go. You can't see, you can't do this, you can't do that. Silverstone is still a fantastic racetrack. You speak to any of the riders, and they'll all say how much they enjoy Silverstone. Fast-flowing, massive track. Really good fun from that point of view. And from a fan's perspective, you need your walking shoes on, and you need sort of several changes of clothes, because it is a vast area to cover. We'll do a event chat about it, I'm sure, in the build-up to the British Grand Prix. But since we're 3 weeks ahead, I just kind of wanted to say, don't. If you've never been, don't rule it out. Yes, it's not Donington, or no, it's not Donington, depending on your English. But it is still a great racetrack. We have great racing there. And it is somewhere that you should go if you've never been before. There's plenty of entertainment that goes on around the outside, the perimeter of the track as well. There's great bars on site, stages, entertainment. There's even a museum that's quite reasonable to go and have a look at as well. That's got bits and pieces going on in it throughout the weekend. So I think that my point is, don't get sucked in on unconscious bias against Silverstone. Support it if you've got the money. That is the one unfortunate side of things that you're going to have is a shed load of cash to go. But the fact is, it is the British Grand Prix. Jake Dixon is doing particularly well from a British perspective, and we will have some great racing there as well. I'm absolutely sure of it. And, sorry, if you're not going to go for the racing, you've got to go for Thursday. Two Wheels for Life, of course, it is the charity that supports MotoGP. MotoGP supports it. Two Wheels for Life is a very important charity. If you want to know more about that, roll back a couple of episodes on OMG MotoGP and you'll come across Andrea Coleman, an interview that I did with her. Absolute embedded in motorcycling. She was a motorcycle racer herself, although we all know her, of course, as the purveyor of our great charity. So have a bit of a look at that as well. But please don't rule out the British Grand Prix just because of what you've heard.
Well, I think that pretty much sums up our German Grand Prix preview. But before we do head to our Silverstone preview, Greg, you are off to Donington this weekend for World Superbikes. Yes. Can you give us a little preview of what to expect this weekend?
It's a tricky one because Toprak did the treble there 2 years ago, but he's just hurt himself again. So that's the first thing we're going to have to find out is how bad he's hurt himself again in a training accident in Turkey. Second one in recent weeks. However, Bautista won the 2 long races last year, which was a big surprise, actually, to many at the time. He'd crashed the previous year. The weather, you never know what the weather's going to do you? But again, as Keith just said, there's a whole raft of things going on. You've got the inimitable Michael Hill runs the paddock show, and you've got a concert happening with the riders. You're going to have all sorts of people there with that. It's a great way to get autographs. And, of course, it's an open paddock as well, so you can come in, meet everyone. I believe there's going to be a rendition of the national anthem from a certain 2-time champion we know well on the television, so watch out for that with a piano on the starting grid. I believe that's the plan. It's going to be great, and it's Donington World Superbikes is one of the highlights of the British motor racing year, isn't it? We just had the F1 Grand Prix, we got Donington, and then we've got the British Grand Prix at Silverstone for MotoGP. What is quite strange is that we've had a gap now. We've had a huge gap in the calendar until recently, and now we've got back-to-back. So as soon as they get out of Donington, they've got to get to Most and the Czech Republic ready for the end of next week in what's going to be a critical part of this championship now with well over 130 odd points up for grabs. I can't wait for Donington. I think it's going to be brilliant. We've got the R3 Cup racing again as well. There's no 300s, but we do have the Women's World Championship, which is a new initiative, of course, that I'm sure you've talked about recently, and World Supersport. So loads of track activity. One of the busy ones of the year, actually, with lots of British national championships happening as well. So let's just hope the weather's good. But even if it's not, it's Donington World Superbikes. It'll be brilliant.
Yeah, can't wait. But thank you so much for joining us on the pod, Greg. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk from you. Talk from you. Oh my God, talk with you. And Keith, as always, bloody love chatting with you. The stories that come out are brilliant. But guys, thank you once again for listening to OMG MotoGP. And if you can't get enough of us, you can check us out on socials at omgmotogp.com on all platforms. Or if you have a question for our team, you can email us omgmotogp@gmail.com. And lastly, a big shout out to our Patreon members. Thank you guys for helping support us. We will be back soon with more OMG MotoGP.